Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, it's time to get started with our next episode as we meet practitioners working in the accessibility area. And today I'm talking with Ricardo Rodriguez. Hello, Ricardo.
Hello.
Hey, it's good to be having this conversation with you. I'm talking from my home office on Vashon Island near Seattle. Where are you talking to us from?
Beautiful San Diego, California.
Well, it's good to be able to work with you again. We've worked together in project activities at Blink. You've also attended the Convey UX conference in Seattle and helped out with that. So I'm happy to have you as part of this activity.
I'm always happy to help.
Well, just to kind of recap some of the things that we've been involved with together. So there have been some projects that we've had, including our work with NASA, where you've helped out by providing feedback in some of the things that we're doing in research design, based on your own familiarity with accessibility. You want to talk a little bit about, that kind of work and how you approach it and in your work as a freelance accessibility consultant?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So for me, the main project is always trying to figure out what are the needs that the project is trying to accomplish and what are areas need to be improved upon when it comes to accessibility. Because one of the things that I've always noticed myself, whether it's in projects or just learning about things, is that when things are designed or projects are designed, they're not always designed with accessibility in mind, and that's not really the issue of the designers or developers. It's mainly that they don't have the experience in that field. So a lot of things that are issues don't really register right away. So looking at it from the perspective of someone who has specific challenges or specific needs, you're able to see what are some areas of improvement that other parties may not be able to, and you can help them on improving those areas.
Yeah, and your work's been really helpful, and as someone that he had physical challenges, that gives us remarkably useful insights into as we design and build out new products. Maybe we could kind of go back in time, and you could share with us a little bit about your story of how you've gotten to this point.
Sure. So for me, I was always a bit of a challenge. I grew up in the late 90s, limited access to internet until the early 2000s. So it wasn't easy finding resources to be able to get help for certain challenges that you may have compared to the ease of access we have now. So for me, it was always a challenge finding the resources to do well in school with my mobility impairments or my vision or my motor skills, especially my cognitive challenges were always difficult finding resources because you weren't as connected back then as you are now. So for me, it always strove to instill a need of what are the resources that I can get locally? What can I find that's going to be able to make this easy for me as opposed to struggle because I don't have access to the resources or the knowledge on where to go. Nowadays, it's a lot more complex just because of the fact that you have a lot of products that are being developed, but without the understanding of certain challenges, right? But there is still a move to be able to learn what are the gaps that our product isn't meeting and who can we reach out to kind of fill in those gaps. And doing that sort of work has always been something that I've always enjoyed, just because it helps create an awareness of what the issue is, and it makes things more inclusive.
Well, we're working with you today. It's almost hard for me to to understand how you were able to overcome so much because you really had those multiple challenges that you had to deal with, and you mentioned them with the visual impairment, also mobility, and then some cognitive challenges. Maybe you could talk a little bit, more about that, and what types of things you work through in your own life to be able to, adjust to it and get to where you are today.
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I was born in the late 90s with limited access to resources. Basically, I was born essentially 5 months premature, so I didn't develop as well as one normally does. So, the diagnosis at the time was I had cerebral palsy, ADHD, limited vision, and I was also slightly retarded, as the term used to be called. So because of that, I was always severely delayed. I couldn't do things that a normal 3-year-old could do. Right? I wasn't cognitive of what was happening around me because of my severe delays. I was just aware that I was looking at things, but I didn't actively register what it was that I was looking at or what it was that was happening to me. Once I got older, I was still 11 years old with the mentality of a 3-year-old. So my brain hadn't caught up yet with the fact that, hey, I'm 11 now. I can now register what's happening. It wasn't until I started getting some support that slowly but surely, as technology and access to resources and knowledge started coming out, I started to develop little by little with a good support system. I started to be able to, for example, learn how to read, learn how to pronunciate my letters, which you do at a very early age. By the time you're 3 or 4, most children are already able to, speak and have, somewhat understandable conversations. And here I was starting to, just barely do my ABCs. So it was a lot of work to be able to kind of get to the point of where I'm at now, where I can go ahead and I can travel and, attend events and do community sponsored things. There are some challenges that remain, obviously, some things that I'll never be able to do. I'll never be able to drive, for example, given my vision. But getting from point A to point B isn't necessarily a challenge anymore, as long as I do it, with safety in mind. I can't be going out and traveling at like 9 p.m. at night because of my vision, but everything else we've developed as a society to a point where I can do a lot of the things that I need to now because of the level of technology and access that we have now that just really wouldn't be possible in the early 90s when I was growing up.
Well, I want to come back and dig into how we work to improve our digital products and services with respect to those physical challenges. But maybe for the next piece, you could talk a little bit about how you started to become interested in accessibility as a professional practice. When did you start thinking about it as something that you might want to commit more of your regular work life to?
So for me, one of the things that one of the very first projects that I actually took on before my current job is I was working for a nonprofit called the Center for Futures Foundation, and they were doing a training program specifically for disabled youth. And it's something that I had never actually considered, just being of a disabled background myself. Like, what are the challenges that people with disabilities have with gaining employment? So one of the things that I had to do from that perspective is, how do we make the hiring process or the interview process more accessible to these youth? How do we make the curriculum that they're going to be going through and the interview process more accessible to them? And it's something that really got me into looking at these are the things that we have to ask. What accommodations do they need? How can we make it easier for them to be able to integrate into the workforce? And it's something that at the time I never really expected I'd be doing later on as I got older, and developed more into a consultant, because the lessons I learned there really branched out and helped me look at it from a wider perspective of this is how it affects this particular field, but what about other products and services? How does it affect kiosks, for example? How does it affect people that are designing buildings? Do they design things that are wide enough for a wheelchair to fit through? Or do they not really think of that from an accessible standpoint because they only think about a regular person when they're designing these living quarters?
Well, one of the reasons that I've been doing these interviews is to help people who are new to learning about accessibility realize that we all have different journeys that take us into specializing in that. Was there a time when you realized that there are actually people working in accessibility where it was their regular full-time job to be trying to improve things?
For me, one of the first times I actually learned about that was actually at the Blink UX concert conference that I went to. What was it, 2 years ago? Um, Basically, because it was something that I had never been to a conference like that before. I've been to other conferences for other things, but never for one that was specifically geared towards accessibility and just creating that awareness of it. And it was the first time where I've been in a location surrounded by other people with similar interests where it's like, hey, we're all here talking about the same thing. We're covering different aspects of it. And we just want to share ideas and share resources on how to make products across a wide variety of areas more inclusive in their design. And we're doing that by including people who are subject matter experts because they are familiar with accessibility, whether it's from a lived perspective like my own, or whether it's because they learned about accessibility and now they are doing it professionally and they are really, really interested in doing it, not just because it looks good, but because it creates a more inclusive product that everyone can access.
Well, your lived experience is certainly something that is valuable as we look to designing new products and services. Maybe let's dig into the specific physical challenges and kind of go one by one. And you could talk about what issues that you've encountered in your own life, and then what types of things you carry over into your analysis. And so one of those would be your visual impairment. So, kind of what's your lived experience for that, and how do you approach it when you're helping out as a consultant?
So for me, like with my visual impairment, my thing basically is I am extremely nearsighted. It also just limits my ability to be able to see things. So for me, anything that I use, any document that I have to read, has to either have the ability to be zoomed in so I can read it bigger, or I have to have the ability to like just change the font so I can read it without straining myself. So the first thing that I look at when I'm looking at a product, it doesn't really matter if it's a software or a game or anything like that. Anything that has basically written dialogue is for me like the font size. Is the font size something that I can change or that I can look at? The second aspect of it is, does it have a good color contrast? Am I able to read it properly, or do I have to take great pains like copying it into something else to be able to legibly read it because the background and the font really just don't match and I have to strain my vision to be able to read it. Anything like that is just a big challenge for me. Fortunately, nowadays, most locations or most avenues have really good color contrast. You do run into the one product that may have like the terrible color contrast that just needs improvement. But most of the time, I've seen at least the color contrast is good. The main thing that I usually have to worry about is just the really small font that they decided to implement, or when they try to be fancy, like, oh, we're going to use this cursive font that most people can't read anymore because they don't teach it. That's very difficult for people like me to be able to read, because not only in some cases have you just forgotten it, in most cases it's just so small that even if you try to actually increase the font size, it really wouldn't help.
Well, one of the things that we do as accessibility professionals is try to make our team members understand that there are so many assistive devices that are out there that can help physical challenges, but it requires that you're not doing things that in the software that prevents you from being able to make the necessary adjustments with your assistive devices.
Yeah, no, and that's always something that it goes back to being able to design things in a way where it's open for other people. One thing that I've noticed is just the fact that in certain cases, basically, just that lack of knowledge can inadvertently create barriers, but the willingness to learn how to design things better is always going to be an asset, because then you understand, okay, instead of implementing this nice looking cursive font, instead I'll do something else that's more easy to read for everyone else. It might not look as fancy, but ultimately if it improves the people's ability to be able to use it and read it, that should be the end goal, as opposed to let's make this look all nice and fancy even if some people are not able to read it.
Mm-hmm. And another physical challenge is mobility. So maybe talk a little bit about your experience with that, with digital products, and how you comment on that as a consultant.
So for me, like the main mobility aspect that I have is mainly just essentially motor skills. When I was growing up, I did have significantly more, but now it's limited to motor skills. So if I'm going ahead and I'm using a kiosk, for example, or a machine, right? One of those regular ATMs or just a regular machine. The main thing for me has always been an issue of like not requiring you to do rapid movements essentially right away, because for me it takes time for me to be able to grab something and orient things a certain way. Video games are basically a good example where they have certain actions you have to take and you have to do them very, very rapidly. For me, those are very difficult to do, just because of the fact that it takes me a while to be able to do things using a controller or a handheld or anything like that. So really rapid responses are something where it's just exceedingly difficult to perform because of how the product was designed, where they're asking you to do a specific move set in a very rapid fire method. And it's, for me, it just creates a toll on me.
And then that kind of brings us to the third one I wanted to talk about, which is cognitive challenges, which for me is the area of accessibility where there's been the least amount of improvement overall. I think we pay a lot of attention to sight and mobility and sound with closed captions, but with cognitive challenges, I think that's an area that just a lot of organizations, even if they're involved in accessibility, aren't really sure how to approach it. So maybe talk a little bit about your experiences in that area and the challenges you encounter.
So for me, like one of the main challenges that I've always seen is that, like as a society as a whole, right, we always want to be able to seem that we're smart. Right, when we're designing products and services, we want to be able to see that we are very smart, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The main challenge when designing products or services, though, specifically with cognitive challenges in mind is the fact that it goes over so many heads that designing simple is best. Designing things in a way where you're describing things one step at a time without using any excessive words or terms that regular people who, for example, may not have gone to college are not going to understand, is something that it's a simple concept, but it's not really implemented that often. And it's something that I've always seen, because people like myself who have cognitive challenges, like, and it's unusual because I work in tech, but it's because I have cognitive challenges that even working in tech, I still design, okay, we're going to do this one step at a time. First, we're going to do this, and then this next step, and then this third step to finish out the project or whatever activity we're doing. And it's something that what I've seen using certain products or services or websites, it's not done that way. They have an expectation where people are automatically going to understand a certain set of complicated instructions without being told exactly what to do for step one or for step two or for step three. And the challenge with that is not only is it ignoring the fact that not everyone using that same product or service is going to be at the same educational level, it's ignoring the fact that not everyone is going to be at the same cognitive level as well, where some people like myself can still be very high functioning, but we still need some sort of breakdown in terms of the steps to do a certain thing. Like a good example that I always reference, basically, is those IKEA catalogs. When you have to actually build something, all it is just pictures. It's like that doesn't tell me what I'm doing. So like using that one as a good example, just looking at a reference point, me being visually impaired and just looking at this and not having any actual instructions, it is like the most challenging thing to do because I'm not being told specifically what to do in a step-by-step instructions.
And we're working on an article together related to this, and one of the things that you brought out in that is, for example, if you're filling out a form or working through a procedure, is that that your short-term memory it doesn't necessarily carry over too long, so that even within individual steps, it's useful for you to continue to have detail about what to do and then what the next step is.
Exactly. Using just some forms that I've seen on the internet, for example, they'll have like, please put in this information. And then at the bottom, when you're done with the information, it'll say, this information will be used for this or that. And for me, with my brain thinking is, like, you should be telling me why I need to put in this information at the very beginning before I get to that information, as opposed to at the very end. Because then if I'm forgetting why I'm putting it, I can just reference it at the very top. Oh, this is why I'm doing it. And then just fill it out. And if I need to, it's at the very top of the form and it flows just a lot better. Whereas if the information's at the bottom, I would have forgotten why I'm putting it in. Oh, why is my name up here? I don't remember anymore because I'm not being told exactly why I need to put it in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the article, we get into hint lines that disappear and pop-ups that may not persist. One of the other areas that you brought up was when, I think you referred to it as just too many things going on, or a really busy screen, and that focus can be an issue.
Yep, definitely. Because for me, like nowadays, it's not as bad as when I was younger. But I still suffer somewhat from my ADHD challenges, where it's like if I'm reading an article, or if there's too much, I kind of have to like break it down into sections. But if I see an ad or something, or a banner just pops up, my attention is immediately diverted to that, and like I'll forget where I was. Like, what was I reading? What column was I on? What was I trying to do? Because it just diverts so much from what I was doing, and it just creates a challenge in being able to finish whatever article or activity I was trying to do.
Well, I think everyone will find this information very helpful, I think our article will have a lot of good info as well. For you, just looking ahead, what types of things are you working on? What are you looking forward to in the next part of your career?
So for right now, I'm still freelancing. Basically, I am currently going to be in the process of mentoring some people on accessibility with a new volunteer group that just opened up. In the long term, I do plan on being able to land an official accessibility job down the line, just because that is something that for me is always near and dear to my heart. It's not something where it would just be a job, but something where I can help make products more accessible for a wide variety of people would be just the end goal for me long term.
All right. Well, great, Ricardo. It's been great talking with you. Thank you for sharing your ideas. It's also been good to work with you, and I look forward to doing that some more. And hopefully, we can get together at some point at a physical event again in the future.
Yeah, definitely. It's always happy to. I was hopeful to lend a hand, so we'll have to see when that is.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye, bye, Ricardo.